get to share from the scriptures, if I have a favourite part of the Bible that I can get to share on, it's when Jesus encounters other people and the story that unfolds in that. I love those encounters that Jesus has with people, because so much about the nature, the heart, the intent, the ministry, so much about God comes out when we examine those encounters and we ask those questions, the who, what, where, why, how, questions about those incidents, and we dive into it. We're looking at an incident tonight found in Mark 5, verses 1 through to 20. And I remember a few years ago when I got blessed and given a trip to the Holy Land, standing on the western banks or the western region of the Sea of Galilee, looking across. You can see the other side of the sea. You can see the hills on the other side in the distance. And knowing that it was over in that part in the distance where the hills were coming down into the lake in the distance, that this incident took place. I'm not exactly sure where. I don't think even scholars know where. They know roughly the region, and that's about it. But I remember thinking, wow, that's where it happened, over there. If you've got your Bibles, or you can read along behind us, I think, have you got that? Excellent. So we're reading from Mark chapter 5. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Now, just as an aside, when you're reading these incidents, you've got to get into the story, okay? Put yourself there. Don't just let the words roll over you and go, yeah, whatever. Get into the story. Imagine yourself there and this unfolding. That gives you some insight, and it raises the power of this in our lives. Just imagine you're in this. So he gets out of the boat, and a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. Okay, interesting. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons off his feet, obviously using rocks or whatever. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day amongst the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. This is not the sort of guy you want to run into when you're on your own. He terrified the locals. When they had been able to subdue him, obviously with a bunch of people, and tried to chain him up, that didn't even work. He could smash free from that. And so rather than try and deal with this problem, he just survived outside in the tombs. The local town, Gadara, is about 6 miles inland from the beach, from the shoreline. So they're thinking that the tombs were always outside of the city area, so I think the tombs were maybe near the coastline. And the town was a little distance away. So the people are happy for him to get around and just hang out there. He's not bothering them too much if he's near the tombs. Scaring the daylights out of them, he's making a no-go zone for people, sure, but at least he's not terrifying them in the town. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us amongst the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out of the man and went into the pigs. And the herd, about 2,000 pigs, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there. And get this, I love this verse. He's sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. Dressed and in his right mind. Wow. And they were afraid. They were afraid. those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told all about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis, and that's the 10 cities are in that region, how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Wow. I would love to have been there. Some of these, I couldn't it be a fly on the wall? Couldn't I have a camcorder or something just to let me be there to see it? Something just to be able to see these incidents. Some of the others that where Jesus has encounters with people like the lepers. Mate, I just want to be there. I just want to see it. I've often thought that there's a play in this, a drama or something that you could produce, based on the eyewitness account of the pig herders. All right? These guys had the charge of a herd of 2,000 pigs. That is a serious herd, serious amount of pigs. Now, for the Jewish people, obviously, they didn't want to have anything to do with that because pigs were an anathema. Pigs were an unclean animal. But for the people over in the area of Gadara, they were not Jewish people. All right? So that didn't matter. They ate pigs. Pigs were very much a part of their lifestyle. So that herd was significant. And herders were looking after them. There was no fences in those days. No pig pens or fences or sties or anything. Pigs just roamed around and you sort of guarded them to keep them together. And these guys are looking after it. And you can imagine them sitting up there, maybe having a cuppa or something. It's sort of like whatever time of the day it was. And they see this boat of Jewish people coming towards them. And they go, oh, mate, don't they know who lives around this area? You got to be kidding me, mate. Let's have a good look at this. We're going to have some fun. Because they knew that, Psycho Joe is up the back there and he's going to see these guys coming in and it's going to be mayhem. So they probably just crept up to the brow of the hill or whatever and looking over, just going to see the carnage that this crazy man's going to do with this bunch of boatload of fishermen who've pulled up to the wrong area, for crying out loud. What were they thinking? Their bad day. So Jesus gets out of the boat, bang, the guy comes down, and then, stunned, they see the guy fall on his knees and the whole encounter thing, and their herd of pigs ends up down the creek dead. Uh-oh. Things just went from what anticipated some great entertainment to how are we going to tell the village that all the pigs are dead? Uh-oh. The boss is not going to be happy. Anyway, what an amazing story this is. It reminds me that the spiritual realm is the most significant realm there is. Okay? We live today in Australia and in our Western world when the spiritual is almost negated. It doesn't exist. It's like the mumbo jumbo of the primitive tribes. They believed in that sort of stuff. But rational Western people, we don't think and believe in that stuff anymore. It's all been, pushed aside with the modern development of science and so forth. Keith Green wrote a song many years ago. Some of you don't even know who he is. That's how old I'm feeling there. Keith Green was a great musical prophet of the 80s and 70s. He wrote a song called No One Believes in Me Anymore. And it's a song basically where the devil's singing. And the line in the song is, it's getting very easy. I used to have to sneak around, but now they just open the door. It's getting very easy now since no one believes in me anymore. And it's so true in our Western world. The power of evil is so at work in our communities, bringing its destruction and havoc into the lives of people, yet no one seems to understand where it's coming from. What power lies behind it? Because no one believes in that anymore. The Bible makes it very clear, from before it even starts to write in Genesis 1:1, that the spiritual realm is the eternal, is the permanent, is the significant realm. Before God even spoke this physical world into being, guess what? The spiritual realm was there. When this physical realm gets wrapped up, guess what? The spiritual realm where God is and exists and has always existed will be there. Don't think that this is the permanent one, or this is permanence and the ultimate insignificant. That is not right. The spiritual realm is. The spiritual realm. And part of that is the power of evil that's at work. And we see it at work in our physical realm. And the Bible teaches us very clearly that the nature and the intent of these evil powers that are at work in our world are to kill, to steal, and to destroy. Kill, steal, and destroy. John 10:10. Now this guy's life, this guy who lived in the tombs, who couldn't be chained, who cut himself with rocks, who cried out day and night, is a classic picture of the work of the enemy in people's lives. He comes to steal, to rob, to kill, destroy. This guy had been so robbed and destroyed that he had no name except Legion. He would have been given a name at some point. We don't know him as Joe or Mick or anything. He's just, what's your name? And it's even the demonic powers that speak. Not even him. He has been so lost in the power of evil. His relationships have been destroyed. He lives in isolation miles away from the town, unable to be in relationship with anybody because of the power of evil that's cooked his head and ruined him. He lives in the tombs in isolation. He's literally a danger to other people. He's been that affected. You know, the power of evil at work in our world always dehumanises us and makes us behave like animals or even worse. You don't believe me? Look on Netflix and look at the world's worst prisons or whatever, and just see what the dehumanising power of evil does to people, and the power of sin at work that destroys our humanity, our compassion, our kindness, our gentleness, the way that God intended us to be, and leaves us almost, below animal status. This guy, totally isolated from other people. His mind, he's lost it. It's been robbed and destroyed. He lives in anguish and pain and self-destruction, cutting himself with rocks. I don't understand that, but it agonises. It causes me pain when I see that in people's lives. I've known young girls who cut themselves with things to help ease their pain. This guy was understood that he'd gone through the same thing, except he didn't have razors. He's using rocks. You may know some people like this, maybe not like as bad as that, but people who've struggled, perhaps losing their identity of who they should be or supposed to be. People who've ended up in isolation and brokenness. People who've been robbed and destroyed and live in pain and in self-destruction because of the powers of evil. It's a uniquely human thing. No other animal species on earth suffers from this. It's just us. The power of evil has no other intent than to destroy people, because we alone were created in the image of God. We alone. We alone. And so his greatest intent is to destroy God's greatest creation and to take us as far as possible away from relationship with him and to destroy that which God has for us, God's plans. And we need to be reminded that all of us are only choices away from the same stuff. Bad choices can lead us into the power of evil, and we need to always be on guard against that. Having said this, you know what? The Bible doesn't say a great deal about the powers of evil. Doesn't give us an expose. Doesn't go into great detail about the powers of evil or the devil. I just want to say there's some thoughts why. And I think one of the things is that we have a tendency to be fascinated with it. So the Bible just tells us enough, and that's it. There's that people have a fascination with it. We have a tendency to want to look for it everywhere. You know, in the Old Testament days, in the Jewish society, they got so fascinated with this. They had thoughts, there were sayings, there'd be 10,000 evil spirits in your left hand and 10,000 on your right. people were particularly vulnerable, like the children or mothers who were giving birth, particularly vulnerable to the devil, and evil spirits. It's like this, woo. All right, settle down. Settle. The Bible doesn't say any of that. You've just made it all up. Made it all up. Because we have a fascination. Fascination. We are told enough, and that's it. We are told enough to know that we are to avoid it, the powers of evil, to not have anything to do with it, to give it no options or power in our lives, to resist it. And we are told very clearly that God is sovereign. Okay? God is sovereign. There is no... cartoons will give you a picture of the devil on one side and God on the other side of your shoulder, and they're both having an argument. The devil is not God's equal, just in the evil side. There is no equal to God. God alone is sovereign and supreme. There is no question or of usurping his power or authority. There is no question of him losing his place. Ever. In any situation. God is sovereign. No matter how much evil seems to be winning here on the face of the earth, never forget that God is sovereign and remains so, and cannot be anything but. And that Jesus is Lord even over the demonic realm and the powers of evil. When he walks on shore on this boat and the crazy demon-possessed man comes running towards him, what happens? There's no struggle. What happens? The demonic-possessed man falls on his knees. Falls on his knees in submission and acknowledgement of who Jesus is. The disciples didn't even know who Jesus was at that point. Remember that? They're still getting amazed at what's going on here. Who is this man? But the demonic realm knows. They know. And as the man runs down, they fall on their knees before Jesus and plead and acknowledge his kingship and sovereignty. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. They know. So don't you forget. We need to remember too. God is always sovereign. I love where Mark puts this story. I don't know chronologically whether it happens at this point in the story. Sometimes it seems like the gospel writers put stories together to suit a particular theme or a purpose. If you look at the story before this one, it's the story of Jesus in the lake, on the same lake, in the storm. And he goes out with his disciples onto the lake, and it's nice and peaceful, and they get out there, and whammo, the storm blows up that even the experienced fishermen are freaking out about and thinking they're going to drown. And they wake Jesus up, and he speaks to the wind and the waves. Be still. And they lose it. Go, whoa, who is this man? So these two incidents, one where Jesus speaks to the physical realm, the physical world, the elements of the physical world, and shows his authority over it. And in this next story, Jesus speaks to the spiritual realm, the demonic realm, and declares his authority over that too. Both situations, Jesus brings chaos, brings order out of chaos. You get that the right way around. Jesus brings order and peace in the midst of chaos. A storm that's going to sink the boat and drown them, and a demonic man who's had his life destroyed. God restores him. And boy, does he restore him. I love it. When the people come to see him, where is the guy? For a start, he's got some clothes on. That always helps. All right? I'm thinking, you got to understand, this guy is wild. You can just imagine him filthy, naked, matted hair, matted beard, scars, scabs. This guy is crazy. And here he is now, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed, quiet, sane. Wow. I want to follow that man. I want to follow that man. No one else can do that. No one else can do that. Jesus said, we're reminded, 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, John says that the reason the Son of Man appeared was to destroy the devil's work. Right? The reason that Jesus came was to destroy the devil's work. Look what Jesus says about himself in Luke chapter 4. Right at the start of his ministry, he quotes this passage from the Old Testament and claims it for himself. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, the recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour." Well, didn't that come for that guy? Didn't it come for that guy? And you know what? That's your ministry and my ministry too. New Testament calls us co-workers of Jesus. Co-workers. When I go out on a job site and I've got one of my mates from the workshop with me, he's doing the same job I'm doing. We've got a task to get done. We work together to get it done. He's my co-worker. And we're Jesus' co-workers, we work alongside him through his Spirit to achieve the same purposes. That's our calling. It's your calling and my calling. Now let me just take a little twist in this. The people from the village are told what happened. The guy's in charge of those herd of pigs. Now that herd of pigs was most likely, given the size of it, that whole town's flock. They were probably the basis of the financial security and provision for that town. That's the size of that flock is huge. 2,000 pigs. They've run back to that town and they've said, pigs are gone. What? They've raced down there to see what's happened to their security, their financial security, their food, everything. I've worked it out, roughly about $300,000 worth of pigs. Okay? Possibly more now. It's gone. Gone in an instant. Poof, down into the water. The fish are having Christmas, all right? But not the villagers. And they say to Jesus, and this is probably the saddest part of this story when I read it. They come in, they see the man sitting there dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Hang on a minute. I can understand you being frightened of the bloke when he's crazy. But now that he's sane, why are you afraid? And they're afraid because this is outside their experience. This is outside their understanding. This doesn't happen. Who is this man? He's freaking them out. Add that to what's happened to their pigs, all right? And they're getting a bit jittery. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Man, how sad is that? Such opportunity right on their doorstep, and they say, please go away. Mate, we know people like that, don't we? Who've shut the door on Jesus when there's so much opportunity for them to encounter the King of Kings, and they go, no, because they prefer to hang on to what they've got, even though it's junk. That's what we do, sadly, as people. You know, the reality from this story to me as I read it is this. There is a price to pay for reaching the lost. There is a cost. And for these villagers, it was too high. For these villagers, the price of ministry or the redemption of a man was too high, so they sent Jesus on his way. So the question I want to come out of this tonight for you is, are you prepared to pay the cost of reaching the lost and not be like the villagers. There is a cost. The cost might be your fear and your silence, your preparedness to at last to be one who will stand up for Jesus wherever he has placed you. It might be as simple as that. Or it might be a bit more. It may be that God is saying to you, hey, let go of your hands that hang on so tightly to the property that you have. Possessions, money, time, effort, energy, family, friends, the list goes on. But all of it has to be submitted to the Lordship of Jesus at the throne of God if we are serious about following Jesus and serious about saving the lost. It's a question we need to ask ourselves individually and as a church. Are we prepared to pay the price? What value do we put on the lost? Do we put on those people that don't know Jesus? The crazies. The people who fried their brains with drugs. Whatever. Jesus has come to undo the devil's work. There is a price. It was too high for these villagers. Is it too high for us? We need to pray through that. We need to think about it. Think about what God has given us, and are we prepared to give it back for him? Just in finishing, this man's natural desire, you can imagine, is to want to get out of there. That place is loaded with bad memories. Memories of people who've rejected him, who've tried to chain him, who've laughed at him, who've cursed him, who've tried to kill him probably. And he just wants to get in the boat and go with the one whose touch and whose word has just remade his whole world. You would have had to pry me off him with a crowbar to get me away from Jesus if I was this guy. But Jesus says, no, you're not coming with me. There's no room in the boat, mate. No, he didn't say that. He says, no. No, I don't want you to come with me. I want you to go back to your family. Go back to your family. It's a bit like the Jerusalem, Judea, and to the outer, to the rest of the world. I want you to go back to your family and tell them, family and friends and town and community, and tell them what God has done for you. And boy, does this guy do that. It doesn't say he went back to his family, but obviously he did. But he didn't stop there. There was a region of 10 cities around this place, called the Decapolis, 10, Deca, and he went into every one of them, declaring what God had done for him. Hey, I'm the Fruit Loop from Gadarene, and look at me now. Don't ask me to explain it, but I know what's happened. The power of God has changed my life.